A Trip into the Darkness. Chapter 25. The jostling of the airplane woke Mallory from her slumber. She felt so groggy and out of it. Sitting up from the couch, she rubbed her eyes and yawned. The smell of his blood rushed to her, and the red in her vision increased, making it difficult to decipher any details around her. Foggy memories of being kidnapped by the Spanish stranger resurfaced in her mind. She had hoped that it was a dream. Risking a look at the large, intimidating male across from her, she realized everything that had happened was very real. His intense gaze was on her, and she shifted uncomfortably in her seat, wishing he would look away. She refused to meet his stare, afraid of how she might react. Grinding her aching teeth, she wished she could smoke a cigarette. She thought about digging in her bag for a fresh pack, but decided against it for fear that he might try taking her bag away from her. Not that she had anything of true value within. Instead, she opened her bag and grabbed her jar of blood to take a small sip. Screwing the lid back on, she returned it to her bag and was fixing to ask if they had any water when she noticed her pills were gone. Alarm and dismay went through her as she dug around inside and realized they were indeed missing. Mallory looked up and saw the man sitting across from her in his seat, watching her. Her vision was no longer blurry, and she could finally make out his face, even if her vision was still clouded red. Fuck, he's handsome, she thought. Her mouth throbbed and her throat constricted. Even sitting down, he looked tall, and his shoulders were so wide. He had on an all-form-fitting black clothes, and his hair was longish and styled to lay on one side of his head. His skin was a dark tan, and his hair was midnight black. He also had black stubble across his strong jawline. Looking away from him, she felt embarrassed. She knew without a doubt that she looked like a starved, insane, homeless person, and it had been weeks since the last time she had seen herself in the mirror. Glancing down at her ripped jeans, they were filthy and baggy on her frail body. Her shoes used to have white on them, but now you would never know. Mallory would not be surprised if her face was also matted in dirt and grime. Her black hoodie, at least, helped hide the blood stains that were caked upon the material thanks to her victims. Sitting on the couch, she wished she could just disappear, something she had wished for many times whilst being held captive by Troy. It was stupid to feel ashamed of her appearance, considering what she had recently gone through, yet self-consciousness burned deep within. There was also the fact that he had taken her against her will. She had not asked to be on his little fancy plane and whisked away to wherever her next prison was, so it's not her fault for looking unpresentable. Anger filled her like hot lava as she remembered that she was yet again a prisoner. Glancing around the plane, she really wished she had her pills. She needed them before she did something crazy, like throw herself at the hot guy sitting across from her. When the plane stopped moving, she looked out the window to find that they had landed. It was still dark outside, so she could not tell where they were. Even if it were light out, she would have had a challenging time registering any details in her current condition. Her stomach hurt from the emptiness, and her mouth and throat felt like sandpaper. Glancing back at the man, he was just sitting there staring at her. Grinding her aching teeth, Mallory stood up and started to pace while her skin started to crawl. "You need to feed," she heard him say, but she refused to look at him again. "I am willing to give you the substance you need." "At what price?" she was able to ask through her raging bloodlust. "Tell me your name." Before she was able to stop herself, she told him her first name. Halting mid-pace, she wondered why she had so willingly offered him that information. If she had been able to think straight, she would have told him to go fuck himself, but it was too late for that now. Clenching her fist, she felt her claws dig into her palm, and the slight pain helped distract from the agonizing chaos within her head. "Mallory." He repeated her name and rolled the R, making it sound sexy and exotic. "My name is Andreas Godino, though I choose simply to go by Andreas. It's nice to officially meet you," he told her, standing up from his seat. His politeness confused her. His height towered over her and made her feel confined and trapped. Panting, she took a step back and wished she could stop breathing so she would not have to smell him. "Come, let me feed you before you pass out or lose yourself completely," he whispered in such a seductive voice, then took another step closer to her. Something inside of Mallory snapped, and her demon took over. She felt like she was watching from afar as she threw herself at him and savagely bit his neck. She vaguely heard him moan as he placed both of his hands on the airplane wall behind her head and leaned down to allow her easier access to his throat. Mallory's arms wrapped around his neck to hold him close to her while she fed. His blood was extraordinarily like the most exquisite and expensive wine she'd ever tasted, and it hit her head like she was overly intoxicated. The full-bodied elixir filled her hollow stomach, making her feel light and alive. As pain evaporated from deep within her soul, she realized how much agony she had actually been in. The constant throb left her bones and was replaced by a wondrous, tingling feeling. Muscles that had been tense and stretched tight relaxed and loosened. Even her fingers felt nice, like she had just had a full hand massage. As she drank from his neck, she seemed to come back to herself. She felt his sexual energy pouring into her, and it filled her with lust, making her ache in a pleasurable way. She had not felt her own desire since that night she had fed from Katie. Pushing her body closer to his, surprise filled her when he didn't act upon his desire or try to give himself any kind of release. He simply stood there, resting his hands beside her head, and let her feed from his body without trying to rub himself on her or find friction to help him reach a climax. With one last drag from his neck, Mallory released him, licking the wound to seal it. He continued to stand there for another minute while he collected himself and then turned his head to meet her eyes. Mallory's breath caught in her throat as she stared into his golden brown gaze. He has the most beautiful face, she thought as she stared at him. Dropping her eyes to his lips, she was overwhelmed with a desire to kiss him. The last person she had truly wanted to kiss had been Quincy, and that had been nothing like this. Biting her lip, she looked back into his eyes. A light smile spread across his face, and Mallory swore she felt lightheaded. "You're looking better already, Blue Eyes," he told her before he took a step back and stood straight up. Mallory stood frozen while taking everything in. She noticed how good she felt and how clear her mind was. The constant racing thoughts had slowed, and for the first time since she went through the change, her mouth did not hurt. Even after Troy had fed her, she was always left wanting more. He had never let her drink her fill, always stopping her before she was satisfied. Taking a deep breath, she smiled at how easily it was to breathe, feeling amazing. "Are you ready?" he asked her. The door to the airplane opened, and fear of the unknown stole some of her euphoria. Mallory's smile quickly dropped from her face with his question. "Ready for what? Where are we?" she asked. Just because she felt like an entirely different person now didn't mean anything. He had stolen her and distracted her from her quest. His plans for her could be horrifying and make Troy seem like a saint. "We are at my villa, located on my personal island. It's about 60 miles off the coast of Colombia," he informed her as he walked out of the plane and into the early morning light. Mallory cautiously followed him, noticing the sun that was just starting to rise off in the distance. She had been asleep longer than she thought. Standing outside the plane, she could hear the ocean splashing in waves, and the air smelled like salt water. She watched Andres walk over to a white flashy car, open the side door, then turn around to wait for her. She glanced around and saw what appeared to be a mansion further off in one direction. Walking down the ramp of the plane, she looked around and could see the water close to the run strip. Surely he was lying, and they were not secluded on an island. He must trust the location of wherever they were. It was just him and her standing on the run strip, and he didn't seem to be worried that she would try and run off. Granted, if she did run, he would likely catch her easily enough, even if she did feel like $1 million at the moment. Mallory continued to stand on the run strip, trying to take in as many details as possible. She was at a loss. He could easily overpower him if she tried to fight him. Finally, she looked at the handsome, tall man who was still holding the door open for her. She could try and play this civil until he gave her a reason not to. She would also inform him that she would not be staying on his island or wherever they were for very long. She wished she had a knife or something in case they got to his house and he tried to lock her away in the basement. "Are you going to lock me in a room and hold me captive?" Mallory asked him, and she could not stop the slight tremor in her voice. Cocking his head to the side, his eyebrows pulled down into a frown. "No. You are free to travel around the island at your own leisure and to be considered a guest in my home." Such pretty words that she desperately wanted to believe. "How do I know you're not lying?" Mallory shot back in defense. "I'm a very old and powerful vampire, Mallory. In my last 900 years of existence, I have never directly broken a promise, and right now, I am promising you that you are a guest in my house and will not be locked away in a room or a cage like an animal." She blinked her eyes a couple of times with the statement. 900 years? Wouldn't that make him like a relic or something crazy? She was not certain if she believed him about being a guest, but she did believe that if he wanted to lock her away or hurt her, there would be nothing within her power that she could do to stop him. Deciding to go along with this civil act, Mallory walked over to his pretty car and got in. With a smile, he closed the door and walked around to the driver's side. They drove up the asphalt road to the top of the hill where his villa was located. It was only about a mile drive from the runway, and even in the dim light, Mallory could see lots of trees surrounding them. When they pulled up in front of the mansion, he turned off the car and got out. She went to reach for her door handle, but the next instant the door was opened for her. Standing back, Andre stared off at the ocean while he waited for her to get out. Exiting the car, she stood there and stared at the huge, beautiful house. It was made from dark wood with tons of windows and gray and brown rock accents. There was a wraparound deck in front of the house and huge rocks scattered about. Large flat rocks were embedded into the concrete and served as a sidewalk leading up to the entrance. Tropical plants and flowers were littered everywhere, and she could smell the sweetness of the flowers in the air. Everything in front of her must have cost a fortune. "How long have you lived here?" she asked, trying to take in the scenery. "I had this place built sometime in the early 70s. Before that, I lived on the mainland at my parents' old estate." He told her, and she nodded as she thought about what it would be like to design and build her own home. The freedom to decide everything you wanted and would be incredible. The possibilities would be endless with enough money and time. The sound of him clearing his throat made her realize that they had been standing there for a while and that he was likely impatient to get inside. When they got to the entrance, Andres held the glass door open for her. Mallory nodded her head in thanks before stepping over the threshold. Hard wooden floors greeted them, along with plush white rugs. The lights were already on within the huge open room, and there were floor-to-ceiling windows everywhere she looked. Off in the distance, she could see the sun reflecting off the ocean. Pinks, oranges, and a smear of red dancing on the ice-blue water. If she were an artist, this image of the ocean would have been one that she aspired to paint. Mallory quickly kicked off her dirty shoes. Glancing down at her feet, she saw how her socks were in no better condition, stained almost black from the grime covering them. She truly was filthy, and she felt wrong about walking to such a clean and glorious house like this in her condition. She did not want to leave her filth in such a place of beauty. Looking at her, Andres gave her a kind and breathtaking smile, then told her, "Don't worry about the dirt, Blue Eyes. I will show you to your room, and you can take a shower if you want." "I have no clean clothes," she informed him. Pursing his lips, he nodded, then replied, "Morgan is one of my staff members here. I will check with her. She's about your size." With that, he started walking out of the room. Mallory thought about putting her shoes back on and leaving, but she was curious about what the rest of the house looked like. She had never in her life been in some place that looked like this. Even Troy's estate did not compare to this, with the spacious floor plans and the glass walls on every wall, giving a marvelous view of the outside. She started to follow him out of the room, but then stopped at one of the windows to glance back out at the ocean. She could not help but admire the view. He must have heard her stop, because the next instant he was beside her at the window and was staring out at it as well. A man by the name of Jose Jonathan June Johann designed and built this house for me with his crew," he said from close beside her. She could feel his strong aura seeping into her skin, making her feel warm and safe. "That's a hell of a name for a man to have," she told him in wonder. "I know. That is exactly why I decided to hire him for this build. It fascinated me, and few things in this life pique my interest anymore." "Wait, you hired him because of his name? That's a brave move. Was he human?" Mallory asked as she looked out at the stunning view and turned her head to stare at Andres' face. The dim sunlight reflected in his golden brown eyes as he looked off in the distance. "He was human, and his design of this house is almost as unique as his name, in my opinion. My siblings told me I was a fool for picking a contractor for no other reason than that I liked his name and personality." "Well, it obviously worked out for you, so I wouldn't say that it was a foolish choice. You know, I wanted to be an architect when I was in middle school, but then I learned of all the math involved and decided to change my career path. Far too much geometry involved in building a house like this," she told him. She didn't know why she said those things, but it just slipped out. He turned and looked at her, and his face was hard to read. He was either confused or interested, or maybe both. "That is a very good point. I suppose math would play a huge role in building any structure. One would have to know the exact measurements and know if certain materials would be strong enough to support such a build. I've never been a contractor, but I would envision the difficulties involved," he replied, and Mallory nodded her head slightly at him. "Yep, all that's correct. There's a lot more that goes into it than you would think. I'm glad I figured that out at a young age. Before I made it my life's mission to build things. Too much in the fine print for me," she told him as she turned away and started walking in the direction they had originally been going before she stopped to look out the window. She felt him following her close behind, and it brought goosebumps to her arms. The next room they entered, she assumed was a living room of sorts, with black leather couches and a large TV and a surround sound. Andre stopped walking and pointed to the left, where there appeared to be an arched hallway. "The kitchen and dining room are in that direction. Now that I'm home, breakfast will be served at 7 a.m. every day." Glancing at his watch, he informed her that it was only a little after 5 in the morning, so they still had 2 hours. Instead of showing her the kitchen, he walked towards a huge black iron spiral flight of stairs that started climbing. On the top floor, there was another sitting area, then 2 separate hallways. Andres took the hallway to the left and kept walking. They passed 3 doors until he got to the last door in the hall and opened it. He stepped aside and nodded for her to go in. With caution, Mallory peeked into the room. It was a huge space with light teal walls. On the right side of the room was a queen-size bed, complete with a wooden bed frame and fluffy white bedding. The floor was different from the rest of the house because of the light blue carpet versus the dark hardwood. Off to the left side of the room, there were 2 doors. What brought her a moment of excitement was the wall of windows and the view of the ocean outside. Mallory stepped past Andres and gasped at the sight. In front of the windows, there was a wooden desk with a chair, perfect for a writer to look out while they wrote. "There is a bathroom to your left. I will go check with Morgan about finding you something clean to wear," Andres told her before she heard him walk away. Turning around, she found that he had left the door open to the room. It was a small gesture, but it made her feel safe, knowing that he was not trying to lock her in here. Mallory wasn't certain that she would ever be comfortable being in an enclosed room again. Walking to the doors on the left side of the room, she opened one and found a large, empty walk-in closet with a little sitting area in the middle of it. Closing the door, she knew she would never have a use for that room. Moving over, she opened the next door and found the bathroom. It was designed in similar colors to the bedroom, teal and light gray. There was a walk-in shower in one corner and a claw bathtub in the other. At the top of the ceiling, on one side of the wall, there were small windows with designs made within the glass, which allowed golden sunlight to shine within. Biting her lip, Mallory risked a look in the large mirror that was in front of the sink. Her breath left her in a rush. She did not look as dead as she was afraid she would. There was even some color on her face. The dirt and grime, on the other hand, made her cringe. She hadn't had a shower since Florida. Standing in this extravagant little bathroom, Florida felt like a lifetime ago. When a knock came from her new room, she jumped, startled. Blinking her eyes, she left the bathroom to find a young, attractive woman with blonde hair and brown eyes standing at the entrance of the room. Her energy felt weird and chaotic, and her smell was different. Nothing like she had encountered before. When she saw Mallory, she smiled and introduced herself. Hi, you must be Mallory. I'm Morgan. I work for Mr. Gadino. I brought you some clothes. I hope they fit. You seem to be more petite than me. Mallory stared at the small woman and wondered how she could be considered petite when compared to her. Morgan was thin and athletic, and just a month ago would have been a couple of sizes smaller than Mallory. With a nod, she took the clothes and mumbled a thanks. It's my pleasure. Welcome to the villa, Morgan told her before turning around and leaving the room. Petite, Mallory thought in dismay as she went back to the bathroom to shower. That is one word that she would never have used to describe herself. Stripping down and dropping her backpack on the floor, Mallory looked at her body in the mirror, finally understanding why Morgan had said that. Her ribs were literally sticking out of her body, and her hip bones were sharp and on display. She looked like one of those models on TV who was being shamed by the media for having an eating disorder. Thinking back on the past few weeks, she knew that she really hadn't eaten any real food. She had tried it, but it all tasted flavorless. Also, the fact that finding the time to get food and eat it had not been a high priority for her. She wondered if the assload of drugs she had been consuming at all hours of the day had also factored into killing her normal, non-blood appetite. If only it had worked so well for suppressing her bloodlust. Turning on the water, Mallory stepped in, losing herself in the wondrous warmth. She was happy to find shampoo and conditioner in the shower. As she used them, she was certain they were all brand new. She wondered how many people had used this room in the past. When her skin was raw from her scrubbing it, Mallory got out and dried off with a thick teal towel. Looking around in the empty cabinets, she wished she had mousse to put in her hair. Not that she needed it or anything, but it would have been nice to help calm the raging mess of her wavy locks. Opening other drawers, she also wished for a toothbrush. It had been a long time since she had brushed her teeth. Every drawer and every cabinet was empty, though. She told herself it didn't matter because she wasn't staying here. She would rest for a day or two tops, then she needed to leave. She would either convince him to take her to Columbia and drop her off, or she would steal a boat. The thought of swimming some 60 miles in the ocean with no idea of the direction to swim sounded intimidating and plain stupid. When she had been out of her mind with bloodlust, she had been willing to try and swim 100 miles to get to Brazil. Now that her logical brain was back up and functioning, she didn't feel as invincible and ballsy. Maybe she didn't feel as desperate because for the first time since all of this started, she felt good. Drumming her fingers on the bathroom counter, she told herself she was being ridiculous. No matter what her situation currently consisted of, she still had to get to the Amazon River. Mallory looked at the large, heavy, and cold amulet at her neck. With all the time she had worn it, the thing had never warmed up. It was still as cold today against her throat as it had been when Monique had taken it out of the box and handed it to her while she was in New Orleans. Standing in the quiet bathroom, Mallory would swear on her life that she could hear the thing whispering to her right now, saying that they needed to leave and keep moving. There was havoc to wreck and bodies to drain and things to destroy. Looking away from the necklace, she turned away from the mirror. She wondered if the necklace had encouraged her in her reckless kills. Even if someone had been trying to hurt her, she was not the kind of person to just end their life out of spite. Don't be ridiculous, Mal. You can't blame your evilness on a fucking necklace, she said, shaking her head. Mallory started pulling on the clothes Morgan had loaned her. There was a simple black blouse, a pair of jean shorts, black undies, and a black bra. She knew it was weird wearing another woman's panties, but it would be rude not to when she was also wearing her shirt. She left the bra on the bathroom counter and exited the bathroom.